Hello everyone, thank you for your time, and I want to talk a little bit about our upcoming weeks. We're going to be taking a look at cash and how much money we want to keep set aside for emergencies, and look at some of the things like credit cards and the various ways to borrow money. The cash situation, the book is projecting that you should keep about 6 months back. And I'm going to suggest that that varies based on what your financial portfolio looks like. So for example, if you have a lot of fairly liquid investments, 6 months might be comfortable. To be honest with you, I would say generally 6 months is a minimum. If you've got a lot of illiquid investments, like heavily invested in real estate, then you might need significantly more than a 6-month cash flow. So you always want to step back and look at what your underlying situation is. In my case, I am heavily invested in real estate. It's illiquid and I don't want to sell it, properties anyway, so I tend to keep more than 6 months in cash because I know there are things like furnace going out or sewer line breaking that could require me to spend significant amounts of money in repair. So when I'm looking at an investment in real estate, if you will, I know that I need a certain amount of a cash basis tied to my real estate potential risk. Okay? So on one hand, I might know that that cash isn't going to be getting much of a return, but when I look at the return that my real estate gets, the aggregate of the two produces an attractive return for me. So I'm getting a little far afield here. When you've got a pretty basic financial position, maybe you're living with your parents and you're really looking at just having a car loan or something, 6 months should be fine. In many cases, that's going to cover any kind of short-term emergency you might have and allow you to stay on track with your plans or goals. Within that financial picture, what we need to consider is where you're getting your money from. And it actually could help offset any cash needs you have. So for example, if you've got a credit card with a good line of credit, you might be able to get away with less cash because you might be able to draw money from a credit card. Now, as a general rule of thumb, getting money from a credit card is a really bad idea. If you're looking at that cash advance, I'm running to the ATM and I'm going to pull a couple $100s out, and you're going to get feed to death, if you will. On the other hand, oftentimes, credit cards might offer you checks to encourage you to take money or borrow money from them. I know I frequently get zero-cost checks that I have that I can pay, spend up to 6 months to pay with no interest and no upfront cost. So good credit has payoffs in allowing me to have access to money in an emergency. But the credit card company isn't doing that out of the goodness of their heart. And what their strategy is hoping that when I get to the end of that 6-month period or the end of the 12-month grace period without interest or with a very low interest, that I'm not going to have paid it off and I will end up paying at the much higher rate that they've established, which might be 13 or 18 or in some people's cases 25% annualized interest. So when we're looking at choosing our borrowing, we want to look at the big picture. What's it going to cost us over the life of the repayment schedule? So as I was talking about with the credit cards, if I know for sure I'm going to get paid off within 6 months or 12 months, that's probably my personal cheapest way of getting money, of short-term money. On the other hand, if I'm not going to pay it off, I might want to look at alternatives, a structured loan, and that might be at least it had been, at a 6 or a 7% rate. I might look at credit unions. Credit unions, I think my son just got a car and I think he paid 3%, which is still very, very good for an interest rate. Or I might borrow against my house if I had a house. Home equity loans can be very competitive. The initial purchase of the home loan, we're just coming off historically low rates. So all of these things could have been enormous advantages for getting assets controlled with fairly low interest rate costs. As we move forward and as we start seeing interest rates coming up and the fear of inflation going up, all of the costs of borrowing will follow. And so if we know that we absolutely want to buy a house in the next 12 months or the next 4 years, and we have steady income and feel we can, make the down payment, we want to consider the cost of a rising interest rate, what impact it'll have on us. We know if we look at like a situation with a house, particularly in the early years, the majority of the payment goes towards interest expense. So if I've got a $500 a month mortgage payment at 3% interest, and interest rates go to 6%, all of a sudden my cost of a house went, if I were starting anew or if I had an adjustable rate mortgage, the cost of my house just doubled, right? Because if the interest payment is most of the cost of your payment and interest rates double, basically the cost of your house doubles. People have been addressing that a little bit in our discussion board, saying that could have a very negative effect on the value of houses. And that's absolutely true. I mean, somebody who had been able to buy, a $200,000 house at one interest rate, if the interest rate doubles, they can afford half of as much house. And that's going to take buying pressure off, or your demand starts being reduced, and housing values tend to fall. That's going to be offset just a little bit by inflation expectations with rates going up. So it's always interesting to see how it actually all plays out when you have multiple variables impacting pricing and financial decisions. I hope I haven't gotten you too confused with my little discussion. Long story short is keep some money aside for emergencies and understand what your true cost of borrowing is as you get into borrowing. So that said, you all have a great day. I look forward to your comments. Please feel free to reply to this actual thread, and I will see you in the classroom. Bye-bye.